Hi, I'm Joe Scacciaferro, and welcome to On Location. All right, this week I got a great guest. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. His career is exceptional, and you're going to amaze at how many different ways he's been able to pivot and succeed. He's currently the Vice President of Digital Marketing for the New York Giants. Welcome, Nilay Shah.
Hey, Joe. Good to be on, and obviously you mentioned we've known each other for, I want to say my first year here was 2004, so that's what,
Wow.
17 years. So it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, you met me when I was 3, because I was
exactly.
3 when it was 2004.
Exactly.
So, all right, Nilay, I got a lot of things I want to unpack with you.
Sure.
I want to be able to talk about your career currently. I want to talk about those responsibilities. And I also, you have such a unique vantage point to the industry in total. Not just the sports industry, but how the whole digital world has evolved. You were there from the beginning.
Sure.
So let me set this up with, you went to school as an engineer.
I did. I went to New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I know you're an alumnus as well. And coming out of high school, I kind of knew I wanted to be in the technology field, not knowing exactly what it was, but NJIT seemed to be the place for me. I went to school there. It was 4 great years. I learned a lot, and and I went from college to here, so it's only been 2 places for me.
But let's talk about that. You came out of school, as I did, but at least I went into the engineering side of the music industry.
Sure.
At first. Explain your entry into the Giants and how that tied with what you had learned in school.
Yeah, so I went to school, as you mentioned, NJIT, and technology was at its core, and web design really became something that I was interested in, along with a lot of other technology-based things, networking, things that weren't even web-based. But long story short, I was a diehard Giants fan, and I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anything. The only thing I did know was I was an avid user of their website, so I'd always go on their website, think about ways I'd like to improve it and things like that, and using what I learned in college, taking all those web design courses, that I somehow, some way parlayed that into an internship at the Giants. And you got to remember, back in 2004, the internet wasn't what it was today. There was no social media, there was no mobile, there was no, email marketing was there, but not to the sophistication and personalization that it is now. I told my boss at the time, who's a mutual friend of ours, Kevin, that I'm willing to do whatever. And my background in learning web design helped out, because I became the first ever intern in the quote unquote website department here, and kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, having an intimate relationship with the team, and we were doing all the production work. And we both know Kevin Corbett real well, who's also gone on to skyrocketing his career. But the two of you were the web team.
Yeah.
That was it, and you did a phenomenal job of evolving something that at the time wasn't even within the organization, wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I would say, it wasn't a big deal, because the media coverage at that point around teams being the voice wasn't as big as it is now. And to your point, my first day there was when we drafted Eli Manning, and I was asked to, it literally was me, and I'm sure you were there, Stephen Diddy was there, and I was asked to hold a camera. I lied and said I knew how to do it. I never knew how to do that. But you were willing to do whatever it took to just get your foot in the door, and you kind of learned along the way.
Yeah, it's truly one of the things, and we're going to talk about this later on, is you got to tell everybody when you get an opportunity, just say yes.
Sure.
Just say yes. Yeah, I can do that, and figure it out, and just keep going. Don't fake it and then screw up.
Yeah.
Don't say no.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's always, like you say, it's about opportunity. Opportunities don't come along the way a lot of times, but when they do, you got to make the most of it.
True that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about now.
Sure.
Again, it's an interesting position you've evolved to. It's far from where you were, but maybe not so because the industry's changed. As the digital marketing vice president of digital marketing, give me some of your day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah. So really, if we go back to 17 years ago, the core responsibility was to update all functions of our website, right? And that's from a content standpoint. And I would work collaboratively with our production department to figure out what that content was. And the real job was to get all of that stuff up on the website. Then, as you move towards now, I kind of oversee all of marketing. Obviously, branding plays a role in that. Email marketing, mobile, social media, all that kind of is under my umbrella. And obviously, it's not a one-person thing. I work very collaboratively with our production department, who really ultimately, after we strategize what the content is, are the ones that are going about and making that content, right? And it's our job to promote it. It's our job to amplify it, and also have a consistent voice across all of our properties. And the biggest thing for me that changed was I'm also heavily involved on the revenue side. So what was initially just about content and production has really turned into more of a business from the standpoint of, everybody nowadays wants to be involved in digital from a sponsorship standpoint. So really it's up to my group to come up with concepts and ideas that can go out and get some dollars behind all of the great production work that's being done.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that because, as you know, we walked into Faro City, which for me is kind of new. It's new. The whole backside of it, the running the business. Running business isn't new. Running business in the world of analytics
Sure.
and the world of people looking and studying,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of the Nilays in that world now. Every company, every sponsor, even investors, they have a Nilay attached to them that can interpret what those things mean.
Yeah, I think what in addition, and I think the pandemic has accelerated a lot of the digital first mindset, is that, everything with digital is great, but there's an expectation of measurement being way more at the forefront than traditional linear platforms. And I think, anytime we do something digital, and I deal with it all the time, is all these sponsors have agencies, right? And the agencies are measuring whether a sponsorship deal is worth it purely based off of analytics. The days of kind of gut feel are they're not over, but they play a much less role in when or why a sponsor may decide to sponsor a piece of our content.
And you can identify it down to the individual, down to the time, down to his location. It's amazing to me at how targeted and laser tight you can get on every single individual.
Yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. So we launched this Eli Manning show, which really was the idea behind the show is we brought Eli back to the organization. Was really how do we leverage Eli to help identify some of these biggest giants, fans, influencers, celebrities. And so we launched a show, the Eli Manning Show, where he has these celebrities come on the show, and it's a digital first show. The show does not exist on linear at all. It's completely digital on our YouTube channel. And every week we look at the metrics of that show to figure out what we can do to improve. And I'll give you an example, right? So we saw early on that, the longer the intro to the show was before the guest came on, we saw a huge a huge drop in viewership. So we tightened up that intro to make it a little bit shorter on the front end and go right down to the interview, and our drop-off leveled off. So that small sort of data, analyzing that data piece has kept people on our show longer, which, again, when we report back to the sponsor, in this case Dunkin', those are things we share. We're saying, hey, we're not getting drop-off when you compare this piece of content versus, let's just say, another one that we might not have the flexibility to change.
That's amazing to me because, again, we're learning that. But I come from traditional broadcast.
Sure.
I come from that world, and not just in sports, but I've done entertainment, I've done other networks, and one of the interesting parts is that you don't know that.
Yep.
you have to have, you said it, you have to have instincts. You have to use your creative thought and experiences and say, this is what I think works. And I've done like an MTV to an A&E, and I have to say, okay, audience,
Yeah.
But then if the show, that's why these shows disappear within a season.
Right.
Or never even make air.
And I think, and I do want to stress that, instincts and gut feeling are things you can't learn. It's what you get through experiences and really what's in your core. So it's really balancing both, right? You don't want to be 1,000% analytics, right? And you don't want to be 1,000% gut feeling. The minute you find that balance where data and science and gut feel and experiences are melded is really where you get probably some of the best content that ends up out there.
Yeah, and because of who you are, because even myself, because of that analytical thought, and when we combine that with a creative thought, it gives us a much better. But I look forward to somebody in your position coming to me and saying, "Cut the open, bring this up front."
Yeah.
In the old days, it would be some EP telling me that who doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's just guessing because when they went to a cocktail party, somebody said, "Oh, I want to see this more up front."
Yeah, and I think in those environments, it's the collaboration and everyone respecting the viewpoint that each other brings in that ultimately, produces the best product. Because listen, it's very hard for a non-analytical person who hasn't grown up on that end to accept an analytical viewpoint, right? And the analytic person has to understand that the other person might have way more experiences in terms of gut feel. And it's really, you got to be able to listen to people out and have no egos and put out the best content based off a mix of everything.
Yeah, it's really hard to have no egos in an industry that's built on egos.
Yeah, no, listen, that's certainly true, and I've been fortunate here that everyone is trying to do what's best for the organization. So it's
awesome.
very rare that we run into a lot of those types of issues.
All right, let's talk about Nilay branding for a minute.
Yeah.
So over the years, you've done a lot of pioneering. You've moved the organization. You've used a lot of digital, I'm going to say trickery, but you took advantage of technology that wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of your favorites. What were some of the ones you said, point to it?
Yeah, sure. The one that still excites me to this day is back in 2011, and I know you were fortunate to experience it as well. That when we won the Super Bowl, the whole idea there with social media was, really at its peak in that standpoint where people were all in. And we kind of sat around and said, hey, what's something we can do that kind of makes the fans feel a part of this championship that they might not have been able to be a part of, right?
Right.
And it just so happened at that point I had seen something regarding augmented reality. Now, augmented reality right now is at the forefront. Everyone's doing it. It's kind of in the mainstream. But back then, no one had really, experimented with that. So we came up with this concept. I had seen it on someone else that kind of used it and melded it to fit our world. Was through AR, we let fans virtually try on our Super Bowl rings. So as you know, the Super Bowl ring is something very sacred. The players get it. We're fortunate the Marantich family involved, front office and staff, and it's personalized, has your name on it, and it's something that we'll both of us will keep forever passed down. But that's something the fans don't really get a chance to partake in, right? So we came up with this idea: what happens if we made that ring virtual, and fans through a mobile app would be able to wear it, take photos of it, share it across their ecosystem. And again, at that point, there was no way to do that, but through AR, we were able to achieve that. So in the first 3 days, this was 10 years ago, I think we had 50,000 people download the app, which again, you had to download the app. It was a separate app. It wasn't like a Giants app. So there's a little bit of involvement to do it. We had 50,000 people download this app, put their hand out, and when they put their hand out, the ring would virtually appear on their finger. So if you go to Google and you type in Giants virtual Super Bowl ring, you'll still see a ton of people's photos, whether they at that time uploaded it to Flickr, Facebook, whatever it may be, that they were able to partake in something that there was no way to do, and technology solved, kind of broke down that barrier.
Yeah, that was. I just can't believe you just said Flickr. That's so
that's
awesome.
back then, right? That's probably what it was.
Those seem like lifetimes ago.
Right.
It's
Well, listen,
normal.
That that's the best example of technology, right? Something's there one minute, and then something comes along better. That kind of Instagram probably put Flickr. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know what Flickr is now, but that's basically what happened.
Well, same thing with Vine going to
Yeah,
TikTok. They all do that. I got to tell one story because you and I had this unique bond. We're both alumni of NJIT.
yeah,
So we were vendors. I wasn't staff to the Giants. We would come in during production season and produce their shows. But I had been around for a while, and you and I became friends, along with your at that time your supervisor, your boss,
yeah,
Kevin. But you used to get so excited about tech at the time, or some app like that,
yeah,
and within the scope of everybody there, I was one of the few people who had your passion. But I loved seeing you got lit up. Like you would say, "Come here, come here, come here, come here. I want to show you this. I want to show you this." And it would be, and I just sat there and said, that when I see that in people,
yeah.
I just sit back and go, okay, don't worry about him. He's going to be an enormous success.
Yeah, I think it's again. I think, and like you said, I think we have a very unique kind of story because in the sports, you don't really, especially back then, right? And listen, there's no bigger pioneer than you, right? In terms of changing kind of when you came on board here and all of the programming, that not a lot of people go from tech to sports, and now
Right.
it's a little bit more with the influx of analytics. A little bit now it's easier, but back then, like I couldn't think of anyone who had my background doing what I was doing because there was no roadmap. There was no LinkedIn for me to message somebody and say, hey, I'm a undergraduate doing this. It was luck, and there's no better luck story than kind of like how I got it.
Yeah, and it's impassioned.
Yeah.
Luck. I have a hard time when people say luck. I look at the people who are lucky. They're always bold. They're always tenacious. They're always driven by passion. So I don't know. I can't say luck. I say you earned everything you got, and you took advantage of the opportunity
Yeah.
and exploited it.
Yeah, and I think I'll give you the example because I know people out there is that when I know connections at the Giants. I won a contest and I turned that into an internship, but I had a decision to make. I was in school full time. I lived on campus at NJIT. I had classes 9 to 5, and this opportunity, unpaid, was, hey, come in one day a week and help hold the camera or update the website, whatever it may be. I had to completely change my schedule around to night classes, and all my friends. I mean, in college, the at night it's really when you have the fun, right? And I kind of lost out a little bit on that because I was, I'd come here, then I'd go to class, and then I'd have homework and things like that. But if I didn't do that, right, it was very easy for me to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm ruining my college experience or whatever.
Right.
It wouldn't
right.
have led to kind of all the other things. So ultimately, to your point, yeah, it's let's just say luck, opportunity, whatever it is. Regardless, you have to do something with it, right? Because if you don't do something with it, then it's a wasted opportunity. It's all it becomes.
Let's talk about the creative side of you. So how do you conceptualize? How do you, like, I know as a creative, as a storyteller, I kind of have a rhythm. I know what I'm doing. I can talk to other storytellers, but you're in such a niche world. And
Yeah.
maybe now it's a lot broader, but back then, how do you look for things? How do you bring that to the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just paying attention and looking what's around you. And I'll give you another story, right? We were the first team to roll across any sports to roll tweets into game broadcast. So this was back in, I want to say 2000,
I remember that.
2010 or whatever. Now, obviously, it's mainstream, but the way that happened was my wife and I were watching The Voice, and The Voice, as contestants were singing, there were tweets rolling in. And I was like, why do I not see this in sports? Like, why? That to me, sports, there's nothing more passionate, opinionated than sports. And I Googled, and no one had been doing it. I found a company that was doing it on The Voice, a company called Mass Relevance back then. I called them up and I said, hey, listen, why can't this work for sports? They said, there's no reason it can. And we ideated how to make it fit into our world. And again, there was no benchmark. There was no, here's a roadmap on how to make it right. Is you got to try things. And I think a lot of it is looking outside of the sports industry. And I think the sports has changed a lot. I mean, let's be honest, sports is really a bigger entertainment platform than some entertainment
Yeah,
platforms, right? And
absolutely.
more recently we did this collaboration with Marvel, and a lot of teams had done stuff with Marvel, whether it's bobbleheads and things like that on game days. We said, hey, how can we make it a fully integrated platform where it's touching everything, right? And I think part of that is just not having a closed mind, right? Like, how do you touch all of these sort of segments and coming up with the full plan? And we turned this Marvel thing into something that, I've had like 5, 6 teams reach out to me wanting to duplicate kind of what we did. And they asked me, how did you come out? I said, you sit in a room with everybody who has a voice and you come up with a plan to make sure you do something that's great. And no idea is a bad idea. And you kind of work together as a group and you collaborate, and usually good stuff happens when you collaborate.
Yeah. Oh, God, it's the cornerstone of what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Um, so I get how you learn tech and you evolved your tech, and you can build from that, but you crossed over into a very different position.
Right.
How did you learn those skills? Where did you pick those instincts up?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was sitting back and listening. I've been fortunate where I've been, the way digital accelerated, and especially, pre-pandemic, I did a lot of it anyway, but really during the pandemic, I think what happened was a lot of our sponsors who had traditional in-stadium assets, kind of, obviously there was no in-stadium, last year,
Right.
Everything pivoted to digital, right? So naturally, I was brought to the table to kind of help facilitate how we can create deals and structure deals in a way that digital became a more core component. And I'll give you 2 examples. I was heavily, we did a sports betting deal with DraftKings, and I sat in from the first meeting, from ideation to, my crew created the pitch. I went on the pitch, and that's very rare in someone in my role to be that heavily involved on the sponsorship end. But I think a lot of that is having an entrepreneurial sort of feel and passion
Right.
for problem solving. And how I got into that, I think I rose my hand. I raised my hand. A lot of times it's easy when you're unsure to just sit back, but I'm by nature, I like to solve problems. And a lot of that stuff, when you have that mentality, you get asked to help out, and then eventually you show what you can do. And then if you can show what you can do, you usually get involved more. So there's no aha moment for me. It's been an evolution. And I think with digital specifically, digital, in my opinion, is the central hub to everything we do. Because whether it's PR, community relations, sponsorship, ticketing, digital is playing a role. Whether our ticketing department is running a campaign, it's my crew that's creating the entire backbone of that campaign from a creative standpoint, from a website lead nurturing standpoint. It's all digital. And I think that's really been, why, my role has changed a little bit, is that I think I have a good sense of how all different departments kind of work together.
I love the fact that you brought in entrepreneur into that.
Yeah.
Because that, and I've known you to be that, and it was interesting, again, you're in a very corporate environment, but yet you maintained a very entrepreneurial approach to everything, which I'm telling you, I've worked everywhere. I've been in every kind of environment you can think of. That is so rare.
Right.
And it's so necessary to really appreciate how to get things done and how to collaborate. So kudos to you for not losing that.
Yeah, yeah, and the other thing I would say and appreciate that is that, the one thing I would tell people is no matter how creative you are, no matter your best production skills, understanding what makes money and how you make money ultimately is what will help you ascend much faster, because you can have the greatest piece of content and produce the greatest video in the history of videos, but if you do not understand how you can parlay that into making money for the company, then
Right.
you'll always be kind of in the back. And listen, a lot of people like that, but having that understanding, whether it's entrepreneurial or why revenue matters, or how it fits into a bigger, fully integrated plan, is huge. And not a lot of people get that piece of it, and that's always fascinated me, and I think that's what's helped me is that, from a marketing standpoint, content is a piece of a much bigger pie that they all play in together.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I'm coming from the music side. One of the things I learned early, because I was in business since I'm 20,
Yeah.
and one of the things I learned back then was when I would see a lot of these big synths were just blowing up during the synthesizers were blowing up during the 80s, and it was a nouveau technique, just much like what you had just described.
Right.
But the problem was they evolved from engineers.
Sure.
So engineers started those companies, and engineers built that technology, but they never thought about, does anybody want this?
Right.
And how do we sell this? And a lot of those companies folded. They had amazing tech, but they didn't know or think about how to sell it. And the backside of it, which I learned, and you just completely illustrated that, is you got to look at the market. You go what the market can do and wants to do, and then you have to accommodate that with the right product. So you can push people forward. When I worked at ITT Defense, one of the guys there, one of my supervisors, gave me the greatest bit of advice I've ever had. He said, Joe, never be more than 10% new.
Yeah.
And if you're so on the outer edge, whether it's creative or it's technology, you're going to be left behind because people can't grasp it.
Yeah.
And you're a perfect balance between the two because bottom line, it's about making money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and listen, like I said, marketing, in my opinion, has changed, right? Where the marketing department's role is really more of a support function for all facets of the business. And if we're not fulfilling that, we're really not doing our jobs, in my opinion. And I think a lot of times people create content to just create it, which again, there's fan engagement is huge. It's important, right? But the way media happens now, fans can get Giants content anywhere, right? And sometimes faster than we can even, put it out just because of some restrictions we have in place, that you better be creating content that can help your business grow. And, that's really where my team kind of steps in and facilitates that.
Let's step out now. I got to wrap this up, but I want to talk to you a little bit and pick your brain about the world, the industry, the digital world. Where do you see it going? What do you think is the next horizon that somebody coming into the world, the young Nilay right now who's coming out, what should he or she be prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it a little bit earlier. I mean, if I had to go back in time, I would be focusing way more on being data driven and really having a data background in terms of understanding analytics, understanding how decisions can be made based off of data. A lot of that stuff we've had to learn on the fly in terms of analytics and things like that. But to me, I think you've kind of seen it. Forget like the world we live in, but even like from a football operations or baseball operations, a lot of the GMs now are people that have the analytics background, right? And I think people understand now that analytics plays a role in terms of helping you make much more efficient decisions. So I think analytics for sure. And the other thing I would say is I think the way the world is changing is I think there's way more virtual capabilities. I mean, I think the days of having to run an event outside of music, in my opinion, music will always be in person, but I think you don't need huge events in the sports outside of game day, right? A lot of things you can provide way more opportunities in a virtual environment. So I think from a production standpoint, being able to understand how things work both in an in-person and a virtual setting are huge.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think our biggest challenge for all of us is to understand and engage in interactive everything. Everything has to be interactive.
Yeah.
You can't just put something up and expect people to just engage in it.
Yep.
You have to touch them. They have to touch you. It has to be a constant back and forth.
That and personalization. I think more and more personalized experiences are going to help define brands and how their consumers engaged with their product. Okay,
last question.
Yeah.
And I ask every professional the same thing. So you're talking to somebody, getting started. What's the path? Where do they go? what piece of advice in a short soundbite would you say is the thing you need to hang on to?
I think it's get as much experience as possible. And that doesn't mean a full-time job. That could be volunteering somewhere, anything that interests you, being able to figure out and get some hands-on experience. And I think it's much easier for people nowadays with the LinkedIns of the world, with social media, to be able to reach out to creators, to reach out to people that are in the industry to get some advice or some real world experience. And I think a lot of, in our space, each person has platforms to create their own content and let the world see it. You could be a video editor and post your stuff on Instagram or TikTok and have a great chance of being discovered. Right back then there was nothing like that. Right. So I think if you're a content creator, create content. It doesn't have to be, a Steven Spielberg production. It needs to be, to your core, to your liking, and get it out there. Let people see it and keep on creating.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, and absolutely 100%, which is the foundation of Faro City. That's kind of what we're trying to do, is to give them that platform. But yeah, putting it out, you have 100 social medias, you have ways to get things out there. If you get 500 people to look at your stuff, all you need is one.
Yep, takes one.
And those are pretty good odds.
Yep.
All right, my brother, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. Go back to work, rock the world, and good luck, New York.
And thanks to you. You've been helpful since day one, and I continue to look forward to working together and doing great stuff.
All right.
Thanks,
God bless.
Later.
Ciao.